Recording. Perfect. Okay, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining tonight's Nordiq Canada Town Hall. I'm Chris Jeffries, the High Performance Director. Also leading this town hall will be Beaulieu, our Sport Development Director. I do have a slideshow presentation that I'd like to go through to just speak to the National High Performance Program that we are meeting here tonight regarding, and feel free to ask questions while we go through the slides. The intent here is to give a bit more context in terms of the process that we use to get to where we are, and what some of the changes look like, and what hasn't actually changed. And then at the end, we'll also have a much larger sort of Q&A. So you're also welcome to hold questions till the end. So without further ado, I'm assuming I have, nope. Nathaniel, can you please give me share screen?
Give that a try.
Thank you. Okay, first, just a little bit of housekeeping. New to our website, for those that haven't been on the website recently, is an Athlete Hub section. And it's where athletes can find easy access to selection criteria, racing licenses, para-Nordic information, athlete funding, club programs. And I just want to give a bit of a shout out to our engagement team at Nordiq Canada. It's just been amazing to see the flow of communication progressing over the course of the last couple of years. And it's a really big team that leads this and supports this area of our organization. Megan Begley, our COO, who's on the call, she leads this group, and it's to me, it's like it's a vital part of our mission, right? To be able to clearly and consistently get information out to our community members. So Nathaniel, if you'd like to just speak a little bit to some of the initiatives and some of the goals here.
Yeah, one piece of feedback we got a lot last year was that selection criteria and synopsis and rationales were hard to find. So our official policies, we just need to post onto the website, which generally, like traditionally, was just the document center. But we really want to make it easy for athletes and coaches and whoever to find this type of material, because it is so important. So the Athlete Hub is our solution for that. It's still ongoing. We're going to add more resources, et cetera, to it. But really, the idea is it's kind of a one-stop shop for everyone to be able to find everyone who's like in a race license holder position, I guess, to find what they need in one single area. Another thing we've introduced is a race license holder email. So now we have direct access to their emails, and we'll send out anything important that way, along with a WhatsApp group, similar to the coaches WhatsApp group. Athletes have that, and Katie Weaver and Julian Smith also are able to post in there if they have updates from the athlete rep side of things. So it's ongoing. Hopefully we'll test out this year, and it'll make everyone's life a little bit easier when it comes to finding this type of content.
Thanks, Daniel. And one way I know that the communication is improving is I'm personally getting a lot more direct feedback from community members, athletes, coaches. I know Nathaniel and Julie and other members of the organization are as well, and that's really helpful. Like it's for us, like feedback is information. It's something we'll kind of speak to quite often tonight, and it really helps us to make better decisions and to determine strategic direction. So when we talk about the National High Performance Program, which was formerly known as the National Ski Team Criteria, we always ask a lot of questions when we're going through these processes. Some of those questions that we ask are, what are we currently doing, and how can we strengthen this process? So our athlete performance profile is a really important part of our pathway. This was originally called the Gold Medal Profile. We're in the process right now of changing the name from Gold Medal Profile to Athlete Performance Profile. It was based on some feedback that we had in the summer at one of our training camps around what is our mission as an organization? Is it just pursuit of medals? And it's for us, the athlete performance profile is a foundation to how it is that we go about getting better. It's the process. And so for us, like if we can remove gold medal and actually be a bit more clear and direct in our language in terms of what it is, which is an athlete performance profile, then hopefully that sends a more clear message as to what our priorities are. We've been moving to a decentralized model. I feel like we're officially in a decentralized model now, but it's taken us a bit of time to slowly move away from the foundations of our old centralized model where national team athletes were based in Canmore. And a big part of a really strong decentralized model is ensuring we have high quality DTEs. So for those that are not familiar with the term DTE, that's our daily training environments. So your daily training environment is where you spend the majority of your time. So if you are a training center member, well, that training center would be your DTE. Similarly for a club, NCAA program. That said, also a lot of our national team athletes would consider the national team program to be their DTE in certain times if they're on the road for 3 weeks at a national team camp or when they're on World Cup. So the DTE can adjust, but that's in essence the DTE. And HP projects. So we've always sort of referred to national team camps as camps, but we're starting to use the term projects more because to us it's a bit more reflective of the intent. When we refer to camps, it's almost intended that is where an athlete has to be or should be. But if we're staying true to an athlete's performance profile and their individual performance plan, then we should have the flexibility to allow athletes to navigate a season and a year plan that makes sense for them, and that's where the projects come in versus say camps. What are other successful ski nations doing with similar challenges to us? I mean, obviously the U.S. ski team is a fair comparison. North American, they spend a lot of time on the road, similar environments, and we've looked a lot to their decentralized model for inspiration. I mean, we looked at other ski nations as well, but this is just one example. And then what are other successful sports doing in Canada? We have a really, really strong sports system in Canada. We've got amazing programs doing amazing things, and we don't need to recreate the wheel all the time ourselves. So looking at what other sports are doing, what their processes are, their policies, what they're naming teams and projects. So there's a lot of great resources that we're able to draw from our sport partners. So last spring, when we went through the nominating process for the 2023-24 national ski team, one of the things that really sort of resonated with the high performance committee is that we don't spend very much time talking about like the very, very few athletes that are at the top of our performance pool. Athletes that are just consistently hitting benchmarks at World Championships, World Cup, World Juniors. We spend a lot of time talking about that sort of like next sort of wave of athletes. And what really struck us is that when we have a very clear line in terms of criteria, there's a lot of really good athletes in our system that are kind of left on the outside looking in. We don't necessarily have a consistent pathway for athletes. We have a lot of drop zones. If you don't make selection criteria one year, it's very easily you could be left off of the national team and looking for the supports that you had in the past, access to karting. So from that experience this past spring, we created a unofficial program called the National Talent Pool. Very simple purpose, very simple criteria. Basically, athletes that have competed for Team Canada in the last couple of years, or have received karting, or have been on a national team. This is the list of athletes that sort of met that criteria, and it allowed us an opportunity to invite them to a training camp and just start to look at how can we be we have less drop points? How can we have a more consistent performance pathway? Some other questions: how can we cast the net wide enough at the critical stages of development? So as I said, less drop zones. We know that Oh, sorry. Yeah, development is not linear. We know that there's going to be good years and there's going to be years where we struggle. So how do we make sure that we support athletes through that process? What is Nordiq Canada's role in the decentralized model? So when we sat down as a Nordiq Canada staff to look through this new NHP criteria, one of the questions that came back was like, well, what does the athlete get? And to me, like, I feel like that question, if that's the question that we're asking, or if that's what we're trying to answer, then we're ultimately probably not going to be able to deliver what the athlete needs. So to me, it's like, let's make sure we're addressing the need versus a get. A get is very transactional, and a need is much more about creating the appropriate opportunities. And then what language are you using? And that's something we'll talk about a little bit later on. Is language matters. What does it say to athletes? What does it say to our community? How can we create more and better clarity with that language? I mentioned earlier, feedback is information, and we're always looking at, and between Julie, myself, Nathaniel, Megan, Stefan, Steven, Matt, or Rob, and Eric, like every member of our staff, we're always having conversations. We're always looking to gather more feedback. We're always debriefing in some capacity. So of those conversations, a few of them that we had this year that were more focused around getting feedback on criteria. I held individual meetings with all of our DT coaches. So that's coaches that work with national team athletes. We hosted 2 athlete workshops where we asked the athletes the exact same questions that we asked the coaches, to have consistency of feedback. Julie, Nathaniel, and myself hosted a meeting with the national ski team athletes, development silver and gold, at our May training camp in Canmore. And so all of that feedback came back, allowed us to put together the criteria for the competition programming for the year, COC, athlete assistance, our NHP, our sprint criteria that will be coming out soon as well. So for the purpose of this meeting, this is NHP. So draft 1 of this was shared with our Nordiq Canada staff. So it was a very different process than we had with the competition criteria, where we shared draft 1 with our community all at the same time, including Nordiq Canada staff. But because of the changes here and some of the challenges that are going to be around communication, we felt like this was the most appropriate step. And it created a really robust conversation where we looked at what are the opportunities, what are the challenges, and that process then kind of led to many changes that was within the criteria. We then shared the draft 1 with the high performance committee in our national ski team athlete rep, and got more feedback there. So now we're technically in draft 2 mode, which is where we're at today. And after this process, then we'll have a final draft approved by the high performance committee before we publish it officially. Any questions on the feedback? Or Julie, do you want to add anything to this? I know you have a lot of conversations with coaches.
I just would say that I think a lot of the changes that are reflected come from directly these conversations that were fed by and informed by our coaches and athletes. So I know we've said it, but to just reiterate that we really did listen to the feedback.
So what is the role of the National High Performance Program? I'm just going to kind of read these out, and this is taken from, we have another document that will be shared in the next short while. It will also live on our website, referencing our high performance system and how the NHP fits within that overarching system. So the role of the NHP is to select athletes into a pool-based system comprised of the national ski team, the national group, and the national development group to support these athletes' projects and PSRI. So that's a lot of IST services beyond the scope of the DTE, based on supporting evidence by the individual athlete performance plan, which we'll also talk to today. And nominate and support Canadian teams at international level competitions such as World Cups, World Championships, and Olympic Games. And this is a diagram that can give you a bit of a better sense as to how it all fits together. One thing I would just want to point out too is what you'll see in a lot of our diagrams and our communication is reference to some work that we as a high performance and development group did last week with the help of a facilitator. Part of that was just defining the mission that we feel defines what it is we do, and that mission's at the top here. It's together towards excellence, because we don't have, it's not the national ski team that makes Canadian skiers great. It's our whole community. Like, we're all working towards this sort of never-ending goal of being better together. And there's just three simple words that to us, it really embodied what we do, but it also embodies what we all do. And then from there, identifying the values that we feel influence the decisions that we make. So at the bottom, you'll see the values. And again, you'll see these referenced quite consistently through a lot of our communication going forward, and that's humanity. And one of the things that we mean by humanity is in the past, systems and organizations have always been sort of built around the system and organization. And what we try to do is, over time, we try to put people into that system and organization. And that doesn't work in today's world, in today's environment. And we talk about safe sport, and to me, safe sport is a concept. But if we focus on really good values, then we don't even need to talk about safe sport, because we're going to be living it. And if we create systems and organizations that work for people, so if the person comes first and then we build the systems around it, then we're going to have a true safe sport environment. Ambition, and that one's pretty clear. This is high performance sport. We're ambitious, we're curious. Our goal is always to become better. And then clarity. I think that's usually when we have challenges that arise, it comes down to communication. And I feel like we're on a really good path to being more consistent and more clear in our communication. And meetings like today is a big part of that. So what is the philosophy of the National High Performance Program? Again, this is in the secondary document that you'll have access to, but it's to support projects and PSRI services. So PSRI could be physiology, physiotherapy, massage, strength and conditioning, testing. That kind of embodies PSRI beyond the scope of the DTE, based on supporting evidence by the athlete performance profile. Athletes with the strongest evidence of podium potential at the Olympic Games, and that's when you look at some of our Canadian Tire metrics, or Senior World Ski Championships, should be given the highest priority of services. We do have a finite amount of money in our system to be able to support programs and athletes. So we have to be efficient with how we use those. And part of the NHP allows us to be more strategic in how we allocate funding and resources. Grow the pool of targeted athletes to increase the influence of national high performance programming and to support high quality athlete DTEs. Yeah, and we're never going to be as successful as we need to be if we only have a handful of athletes, and we're only supporting like athletes that are like in that sort of 1%. We need really strong pool of athletes, and we need really high quality DTEs. We can't do it. No one can do it alone. This is a collaboration. This is a team effort, a Team Canada effort. And then if we're really going to be athlete centered, if we're going to be focused on individuals, then we need to support athlete individual performance plans. And these programs and these plans are essential to the relationship between the athlete, the DTE coach, the NST coach, IST, others. Julie, do you want to speak to the this process, the IAPP process.
Sure. Do you have the other document that actually shows the process in it? There you go.
This one.
One of the things that we're, like Chris is talking about, is looking at how we can really get a return on investment, be very deliberate in our programming, support personal DTE coaches as well as our NST coaches to have and use the resources available to them in the most competent, deliberate, and effective manner. And one of the things that we have done is created the gold medal profile. Do you want to just pop back up to it for a second? And this is the, we've renamed it, and I fully support our reasons for doing so, to the athlete performance profile. And what it is a bunch of very key pillars or key performance indicators that help define high performing athletes. And so when coaches and athletes are looking at their programming, they're looking at all these pieces and saying, am I looking at my gaps in each of these areas, and how am I setting up my training, my programming, my YTP, my quad plans to make sure that I'm addressing all of these pillars where I need them and prioritizing them so that I'm getting the most out of my training, and we're not just throwing darts at a board and hoping something sticks. So values, tactical, technical, physical, mental, health, equipment, and daily training environment. Each of these pillars has definitions, clear definitions and expectations. For those of you who have gone to any of our biomechanical lunch and learns or have seen the new technical report card for coaches that were at the coaches conference in April, you know that behind this technical pillar is an entire document that goes through the basic biomechanics as well as the body position and timing for all of the techniques in our sport, and to help really clarify those expectations. So this is a gap mitigating tool. And what we mean by that is prioritize the gap, identify the gaps, prioritize the gaps, and then let's put our resources and time into closing those gaps so the athletes continuously moves towards better performance. This is the gap analysis tool. And then the process, Chris, if you want to jump back to it, into building out the IAP is really about robust conversations between the team that supports the athlete's performance. So their daily training environment coaches, their national ski team coaches, the IST that are involved in the athlete's development, as well as Chris in his role as high performance director, or with the development team, myself and Matt, looking at and working with as a team to help create a YTP based on those gaps identified for the athletes, prioritizing the resources and really being deliberate about things. So we will be sharing these documents. They're still in draft format right now, but you guys can see that the process is clearly laid out in terms of how we would like to approach it. And again, the quickest summary is really a robust conversation with the team who is responsible and involved in the athlete's development. Back to you, Chris.
Thanks, Julie. And you'll see like this IAPP process will be referenced throughout our NHP criteria. Yeah, so this is the NHP program. To me, it's a pretty simple visual, and hopefully everybody here has had a chance to read that criteria. Yeah, it just helps us better illustrate Nordiq Canada's role tied to our mission. We spent a lot of time talking about program names, like a lot of time, and I know there's probably some frustration that we changed it last year and we're changing it again this year, and will we change it again next year? And I would like to think we won't change it again next year. I think we're really close to the system that is what we've been striving towards. So yeah, from a clarity standpoint, we do not want to continue to change this year over year, but it was important for us to get our names right, where it was clearly defining what it is we're doing or how we're doing it, but it also was inclusive. It didn't make people feel as though they were being excluded or having sort of negative connotations to it. Yeah, Robin, do you want to speak to this at all?
There, I think I'm on now. I don't really have a whole lot to add, Chris. I think that all the meetings we had around naming and how language matters, that we need to come up with a better system. The only piece that I speak to is that my goal overall is to lead athletes and teams through humanity, ambition, and clarity, and focus on those values. And like what I've talked to athletes in the past, that we've discussed in the last actually just week, since this has been built, is that the humanity is our number one value, followed by the ambition and clarity. And if there is some confusion around ambition and clarity, then we go back to the humanity piece, and we create systems or create processes within teams that we can call each other out to make sure that we are following and sticking to the human approach. And as long as we have this as our guide, we always have a tool that we can be honest with each other and have good quality conversations to keep the communication going in the right direction.
Thanks, Robin. Nathaniel, while we're on this slide, just one thing I noticed when I put this up here is this is our bilingual version, and we're missing the English values or the English mission. So just for note. Yeah, the other part too, when we were talking about what an athlete gets versus what an athlete needs, and this was kind of started with a conversation. Our mental performance consultant, Dave Paskovich, he talks a lot about performance. He talks a lot about it taking a village to raise and develop athletes, and the role of all the key people that go into that. And so this is another diagram that we'll be referencing a lot going forward. Is what's required for performance, and it's not any one thing. The athlete's important. Our coaches are important, the DT is important, ski technicians, PSRI, our organizational supports. But our competition pathway, we have a lot of information built in here on the competition pathway. And then also, like, in Nordiq Canada, like how do we add value to this process? So this is a slide that I pulled from our high performance committee meeting, but this is meant more for people on this call. These are some questions that I kind of wrote down, but I mean, if you have questions yourself that you like to ask, please do so. But sorry, I've got kids right the stair right now. What does it say to you? What questions come to mind? What opportunities does this new criteria create? What challenges does it create? Like, are there some gaps that we're not seeing? What are we not considering, and what does better look like? So that's kind of the end of the formal portion of tonight. I'll open the floor to anybody that might have questions.
Hey, Chris, it's Greg Goodwin.
Hi, Greg.
Great presentation. Hey, I'll ask a question.
Thank you.
In your conversations, where did post-secondary education kind of fit into the system? Because that seems like a big difference between Canada and the US is their college system is a real feeder into their national team.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's no different for us. Pull up the system diagram. 1 second. As part of our DTEs, like, we do know that NCAA programs and Canadian university programs are a critical part of our DTE programs. So I think we're actually doing a really good job in this area right now. In Canada, we do have some programs that are trying to balance this out really well, but we're also really investing in our relationships with the NCAA programs. Eric Denice, our next gen coach, has spent a lot of time in the last year and a half building relationships with the coaches at those schools where Canadian athletes attend. Last year, he visited Eastern schools, Dartmouth, Harvard, Vermont, New Hampshire. And this year we visited with Utah. He and I were supposed to do an Eastern trip as well, but we just ran out of time and we had to allocate our time to other priorities. Those coaches are on our bi-weekly DTE meetings that Robin, Eric, and Matt run. So and then even in our criteria this year, you'll see that NCAA championships is also built into our criteria for the first time for nomination to national ski teams. So we have identified that it is a really important part of our pathway. But that said, it's also, we know that every athlete's going to choose their own pathway. And it's our goal to make sure that we support as many different pathways with as few barriers as possible.
Well, that's great. Thanks. That sounds like some good connections with NCAA.
I think Olivia had her hand up next.
Yeah, hey, thanks, Chris. I found it hard to totally make sense of the document without the supporting APP document that was referenced in it. For instance, I still don't know the purpose of the national group. I was wondering if you could explain that.
And yeah, the national group there's a few different objectives. One, it's to make sure that we're identifying athletes that we know will be part of our Canadian team trips. Like if we talk about one of our big areas of influence, it's World Championships, it's Olympics, it's World Cup, it's World Juniors, U23s. Athletes International group, we know we're going to be a big part and contributor to those trips. It will allow us to have a more direct communication with those athletes and their DTE coaches around what their individual performance plan is, and see if there's ways that we can help facilitate opportunities. We can build projects like our summer project that we did this year, where we can address potential gaps, create a stronger community. Allows us to be a bit more like in this new format, the national ski team will actually be a bit smaller than what it has been. The criteria for the A and B teams for the national ski team is harder than it has been. If you looked at the gold and silver criteria from last year. So it allows us to be, again, a bit more focused in terms of how we fund that level of the program without while still ensuring we have a wide net. Does that answer your question, or?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm sure it'll be more defined in the document, but like why are there two national groups? Like what will be the difference between them?
Similar to the A and B team. I mean, I can tell you that funding for all sports and all amateur sports in Canada is becoming a real challenge. The funding hasn't changed since 2010. As you know, the costs of everything have gone up and continue to go up. Even I was chatting with Eric Denies yesterday about the Canadian dollar against the Swiss franc. And since we did our budget at the start of the year, that's changed, which could cost us an extra $40,000 or $60,000 than we had originally budgeted for this year on World Cup. Like it's always evolving and changing. So if we can build in a bit more capacity for change within our programs, then we don't have to completely drop things. We can actually we can still support athletes and DTEs and programmings consistently going forward, despite an environment that we can't always predict.
Okay. One last question about the national group. Is it a U26 group?
The first, I'd have to go back and reference the criteria. I'm sorry, Olivia. Like I've gone back and forth on so many documents the last little while that I'm a little bit foggy in like the actual like specifics of the criteria. National Group 2 is wide open. Like there's no age restrictions whatsoever on National Group 2. It's similar to the national talent pool.
Okay, yeah, in the document, the age for the NG1 standards, it just stops at 25?
It's I'll have to go back and I'll get back to you on that one. Sorry.
Okay.
Katie, you had your hand up next.
Yeah, actually, Olivia asked my question because it was more so about the difference between NG1 and 2. But Catherine also kind of explained to me briefly about kind of the overall I guess high performance system that will be coming next year. And one thing she said to me was that there'd be potentially more opportunities for people in the national group based on the available funding, but also based on athlete needs. And one thing that like popped into my mind as like something that I would be, I guess, interested in if I was a part of that group would be the use of CSI testing. And say there was a situation where we as an NSO didn't have the funding for that, would there be an option for a user fee system for someone in the national group to get those types of resources?
Yeah, that's a big part of why through the athlete performance profile and the individual athlete performance plan, it allows us to have a much more direct conversation with the athlete and their DT coach about what those needs are, and then identifying what gaps that athlete has, what gaps in services that athlete has, and then looking at how we can close those. And in a perfect world, we were able to help fund some of that. In other areas, we're able to create opportunities. So yeah, that's definitely part of the. But what if an athlete in Canmore needs could probably be very different than what an athlete in Thunder Bay needs, or an athlete in Wilson-Ann, or an athlete at an NCAA program, or in Nakartok, right? So it's making sure that we are flexible and looking at each athlete rather than trying to put everybody in the same box.
Totally. Sounds good. Also, one of the comments I wanted to make was this year with the camp in Mont Saint Anne and being part of the national group, like I feel like the people that were a part of the national group had a lot of fun in the training sessions, and it really did feel like an initiative that was kind of encompassing of the new direction, which is Together Towards Excellence, because even though 99% of the people there might not end up on a World Cup or championship podium, we were able to push each other, and then those people that I guess can end up there at the end of their career, it felt like one of the stepping stones, and like learning from each other to achieve that as an end goal.
Totally. Thanks, Katie. I totally agree. Tormod.
Hey, Olivia actually took a little bit of the question, because I see national group stops by 25 years old. So like, I'm just wondering, why should we put so hard criteria so soon? Because it's two things you need in cross-country skiing: is patience and passion. And it's one thing you have this, it stops pretty soon in the mid-20s with the age criteria, and at the same time, a lot of athletes in the 20 to 23 years old in the U20 race, basically, they combine it with the university, and it's very hard to combine like the university and cross-country skiing, like on high performance. So what is the rationale to stop it at 25 in national group, and why take a top 15 as a B team when you also have when you also maybe combine it with the university?
Yeah, like the rationale for having the age in there was, again, like strategically being able to allocate resources, and the national group 2 allows us to make sure we can capture any athlete, but there's still, like, from a performance standpoint, we felt that if we're looking at targeting performance towards the Olympics and World Ski Championships, that age range makes a difference. But I hear your arguments, and I know that this is something that we'll take this feedback back to our staff group as well as to the high performance committee, and we'll revisit these numbers.
Thank you, Chris. And as a question from as a DTE, like a training center, how will these teams affect us, like as a DTE training center, with a B team compared to gold, silver? We know that we had a camp in Montsedan. It was also a camp in Canmore and Park City where people was taking out of our DT. How do you look like for next year? Like, is it something we need to be aware of already now?
Robin, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, a couple things I would speak to. Tormund, can you repeat that question though exactly? I kind of got it, but I'm not 100% sure. Can you maybe give example or clarify?
Yeah, because we, as a training center, we build our YTP and also maybe the long-term plan around the national team, so we can make the best support for all athletes on a different level. So how will this the new with the A team, B team, and national group affect us on the ground as a DT coaches? Is it like that? Could it be the same group of people, the same amount of athletes going out on a camp like in Park City, where it was, or here in Canmore, or do we need to provide more support or different support to the athletes?
Yeah, and Tormund, the best answer I can give you is that we are trying to get a few steps ahead of the problem instead of reactionary work in the field. So, for example, this year, we have already started the process for a YTP for the following year that is based around conversations that I've had with the different DTE training centers. My hope is that with that draft now going to Jess and then to Eric to get a structure from the national ski team, we will open up with the DTE coaches next. They will have time to look at it and we'll make adjustments before we finalize what that looks like. So a more inclusive process to make sure that the flow or the training that you see fit with your YTP has a better mesh and we have better buy-in, because we have to have buy-in from the DTE coaches and athletes in order to support a better national ski team program. And then it's also picking and choosing what is the programs that are best suited for each individual athlete. So making sure that the athletes are part of the process of what their training program looks like and if the camps fit or not to what it is that they're trying to achieve. A more hopefully holistic approach on their end. It also goes to the way that I kind of look at athletes as being their own business and that they should be looking after their business and kind of in control of their outcomes of it with the support of their DTE coach and program, but then looking at the national ski team coaches and system as supporting their projects. Does that make a bit of sense, or at least hopefully an understanding of where it's going?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. That was the last question.
Okay, and a couple of other things, Chris, if I could speak to you just briefly. The age groupings and stuff that are in front are not totally just Nordic Canada going, it has to be this. A lot of that has to do with how Sport Canada and how Canadian sports system is actually created around age limits with funding, age limits with karting, and how karting systems work. So I know there's a lot of times where we're pointing fingers at what we're doing, and it's not a perfect system in Canada. And for sure, it is not great for endurance sport that takes a lot longer time to develop the engines required to do this. But we have to fit in with what is the Canadian sports system funding model from Sport Canada, Own the Podium, and other things. So we're balancing a lot of different pieces. So these are all excellent questions and we're aware of them. And this is where communication around how that all kind of fits in the big scheme and picture framework of Sport Canada, and how NSO of Nordic Canada fits in that works. I don't know if that's clarified or made things more difficult to understand, but I've been doing this for a long time, 35 years with Nordic Canada as athlete, and in a lot of times as an athlete fighting the same pieces that some of our athletes are currently fighting. And with some, communication and time, we can have those conversations, because it's not simple.
Any other questions? Oh, lots of messages here. Any other comments or any other last things from Robin, Julie, Nathaniel, Katie?
Yeah, this doesn't have to do with the content of this town hall, but I've heard from various kind of coaches and some other people about how the COC sprint leader is being formed for next year. So I was just wondering when that is going to be finalized, or if you have any information you can share about it. November 10th. November 10th.
It's very close, but we're just kind of batting around a couple last items that we're just trying to fine tune before we can send it out. But it's the Nordic Canada Sprint Series is a new initiative this year. It's technically an old initiative that we're revitalizing, and the old Haywood Sprint Series is really the foundation of it. But we're really excited about having another pathway for that reinforces the value of sprinting in our system.
And domestic race. Yeah, I'll just jump in. A couple of things that sprint series really highlighted for us was to continue to show the value of our domestic races by attaching selection and karting to it, as well as one of the big gaps that we keep talking about is speed overall in our system, and wanting to value the progress and the investment put into speed development as well. So that was another piece. I just wanted to quick comment, and Ilona, are you still on the call? Oh, she might have popped off.
I'm still alive.
Yep. I just had a couple of questions throughout the day, and I know you have as well. Maybe if you can just comment a bit quickly on where we're at with the development of the WAX protocol for trials and how that's going to be shared.
Sure, I can try to address that. So there's currently a wax supplier that came on board for trials. So it looks like for open category for all 3 races at trials, glide wax will be provided. So it'll be a standardized glide wax that will be mandatory to use. Kick wax will be up to coaches and wax techs to test and apply, and they'll have to provide their own kick wax. Chris Manhart is on contract with Nordic Canada to be the lead for this project, and he'll be on site. We're currently working with the supplier, as well as some OCs in the US who have done this, to go through exact protocol on how to clean the skis, what hardeners you could use, what time frames are necessary. There will not be any testing devices at our domestic events. So this will really be no fluoro honor system protocol. And we're looking for next 2 weeks to have a draft of the exact protocols, and we'll put that out to a couple of key waxers across the country to kind of poke holes at. And once it's up translated, Mont Saint Anne, who is the organizing committee, will distribute it, as well as any other permanent waxing information, such as cleaning methods, videos, pamphlets, And a wax supplier rep will also be on site to facilitate any questions as well. So we've had some great feedback, and we're trying to take all that into account and make it as easy for waxers and athletes without impeding anyone's performance, obviously, or day of race preparations.
Thanks, Ilona. That was awesome. So just quickly, just to recap, Ilona will be sharing a draft protocol in the next 2 weeks and hoping to have something out shortly to the community. So if coaches want to start doing some sims and understanding what that layout's going to look like, you'll have that opportunity well ahead of when the trials will happen. And we'll be excited to share more information on that very soon.
Okay, last call for questions.
Say, Matt DiCarafel, quick question kind of in regards to that one. Will that only be at trials, or will that continue on to any other races, nationals, which also has a lot of selection criteria around it?
So we'll be
just
at
trying to see how much I need to buy.
Yeah, exactly. It'll be at trials. It's a pilot project, and with trials, because it's a smaller group, it was easier to get a wax supplier on board. We didn't even know if that would be a possibility. So since it's a smaller, more targeted group, it'll be a bit easier to control the area. Unfortunately, Nakratock, their stadium space is very, very small. So to have a setup like that just isn't conducive this year. It'll take some time to see where we want to go in the future with this. Yeah, so the short answer to your question is trials will be the one event where we'll provide you with glide wax.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that is helpful to know purchasing requirements.
Yeah, and that's just for the open category. So if there's any Q Cup, Quebec Cup participants, it's still no fluoro, but they'll be in separate waxing areas, and they're left a little bit on their own just because there isn't the selection portion attached to their race.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Julie, anything else that you want to add on your side before we end off here?
No, just thanks for everybody. The documents that we shared with you, that the IAPP and the athlete performance profile, we're hoping to have those out as well in time with the criteria and the final documents, so that all of that information will be available.
Yeah, there's still a lot of information to come out. Please thank you for your patience through this process. Our job is to be much more clear in our communication and have a very well laid out, identified pathway. And I think we're on a really good track right now. Really excited about all the work that's being done here. And we'll take this feedback from today. That'll go towards the high performance committee, and then we'll look to get out a final draft of the NHP. Athlete assistance programming for next year is coming out really soon, and so just stay tuned for that. That'll come out via Nathaniel, as well as the Sprint Cup. I think that's it for tonight.